All right, welcome back. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just three nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. So without further ado, we will introduce you to the award-winning, award-nominated, all-around phenomenal author who is a legend in his own right, Mr. Richard Fox. So how are you
Thank
doing
you.
today, sir?
Thank you. I appreciate the very generous introduction.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourself for anyone living under a rock and doesn't know who you are in the world of
Sure.
military science fiction?
Sure. My name is Richard Fox. I predominantly write military science fiction, best known for the Ember War saga, which is pushing almost 30 books total in the entire universe there. And then I've also written the Exiled Fleet series. And upcoming, I have a new series co-written with David Weber called Ascent to Empire. The first book called Governor will be out on June 1st. And then I have a new series called The Tier, which opens up at the end of June. So there's a lot more coming from me in June.
Are they going to be with the same acclaimed narrator Luke Daniels?
No, The Tier will be narrated by R.C. Bray, who's best known for the narrating The Martian and narrating a lot of other really best-selling audio titles. So can't go wrong picking that one up. And the narrator for Governor, I don't know. I think that news is still coming up.
Maybe the Ember War spoiled me because when I think Richard Fox, I think Luke Daniels is the narrator. So
Yeah.
even when I read it to myself, if I'm not listening to the audiobook, I picture his voice in my head reading it. So
Sometimes I do that too. Almost anything I'm reading, I just switch to Luke's voice when I hear it.
all right, and so the next part of the introduction, dear listener, is how we first found them. So I actually first became aware of Richard Fox when my series, The Sleeping Legion, was picked up by Podium for the audiobook rights, and they were trying to sell me on how great they were with military veterans and military sci-fi. So they gave me the first two bundles because the first two Ember Wars books, book 1 and 2 was 1 and 2 and or 3 and 4 were another audiobook. That was back when the market wanted shorter books, and they gave them to me for free, and I was hooked. So then, of course, I went and bought all of them, paid cash for them because I didn't know Audible subscriptions were a thing. I slept on the couch for a week, and he spent it all frivolously, I'm sure.
Absolutely wasted, yes.
And then I reached out to say, who are these Podium people? Are they good people? And we went from there. But so I met them because of Podium. So I suppose, they got their own back because not only did they sign me, they got my money for the books of yours. They're like crack dealers like that.
You know what? And I appreciate having them on my side in that regard.
Yes. So, and I've talked to you about that before, and you never feel remorse about taking all my money.
Absolutely none. No.
So was it Whataburger, In-N-Out Burger? What was the verdict on what you spent it on?
Probably McDonald's. For whatever reason, I love McDonald's breakfast burritos. They do it.
All right, there we go. That's acceptable. So now, sir, because it's been a while since we've had you on the show, we get to ask the religion question. So Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly?
Yeah, I'm going to go agnostic on this one. I used to be of the faith, but over the past few years, I've been very trying times for my belief system.
It's almost like we need a new Nicene Council for Star Wars.
Wouldn't that be nice? I know who I put on it. Yeah.
So if it wasn't those three, what would be your current sci-fi love then?
Warhammer 40,000 for sure.
Okay, do you have a favorite faction?
I tell you, I do enjoy Dark Angels, but then lately I've been putting a lot of time and effort into Death Watch.
So do you actually paint the miniatures, or you just glue them together and play?
Well, I have the miniatures, and at some point I will actually paint them. So just like everyone else with miniatures.
The only one I've actually there's a couple authors I've seen paint them, but the only one I've seen where they looked phenomenal was Larry Correa's. That guy,
he's got some good talent.
He could make that a career.
Yeah.
Just painting those. Of course, his readers would be very upset if he did that, and they'd probably hunt me down for even suggesting it. So because we recognize the polytheism of the speculative fiction universe, Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, or the Potterverse?
Yeah, I'm still going to remain agnostic for those three.
Really? I thought for sure
You know
you'd go
what?
for Lord of the
I
Rings.
had hopes that Game of Thrones would correct itself when the books came, when the new novels came out, but I'm kind of losing hope that's going to happen. Lord of the Rings, it's was enjoyable, but it's complete. Now I don't see how much more there is to it. However, Amazon has spent $500 million for a Lord of the Rings TV show, and I'm curious to see how that'll go.
I
And
just hope they don't screw it up.
that is the big hope I think everyone has, and I don't know how much hope I have in that, but I mean, if it doesn't suck, I'll be very happy. So
Yeah, for me, the Potterverse, I mean, I was getting ready for my first deployment when I even knew that was a thing and people were reading it. And by then I wasn't the target audience. Uh, and Game of Thrones, like I just knew that there was no ending, and I like an ending of a story, so I knew I'd be really upset if I started it and didn't get one. So I was just waiting for the series to finish because of the gaps, and like you said, I don't think that's gonna happen.
yeah.
Um, but I do enjoy Lord of the Rings, so that's kind of iconic. And I'm not sure that there are any other universes in fantasy that are as iconic as like the Star Wars, Star Trek, Firefly kind of thing.
No, not when it comes
So
to TV shows and whatnot, but book wise, Dragonlance always that holds a special place in my heart.
we might add that to the list.
Yeah.
The ones we picked were both books and movies, so that way we got a wider um, exposure from potential guests. But yeah, I'm gonna have to add Dragonlance because I did read those.
Oh yeah, me
So
too.
if they offered you a chance tomorrow to write a Dragonlance book, would you?
Ooh, I think I would take that. Yeah.
Okay. And because we here at the Blasters and Blades podcast love both the fantastical and the scientific, what was your first love, sci-fi or fantasy?
I'm gonna go with sci-fi. Yeah.
Was there any one story that got you in the beginning?
Well, I tell you, one of my earliest memories when I'm about a year and a half old and my mother took me to go see Star Wars back when it was re-released in '79. So really, it was kind of downhill for me from there. After I saw, me, a toddler, holding on to the movie seat in front of me, watching the X-wings and TIE fighters fight. Yeah, it was. I was hooked from there.
I don't think I remember anything that far back.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
crazy.
apparently that's unusual for people to remember stuff that far back. So it's either a good or a bad sign for me. I'm not sure.
So do you think you actually physically remember it, or you've heard the
Yeah,
story so
yeah.
many times that you
No, no,
visualize it?
no. I remember it. Yeah,
Okay. So what is it about science fiction that you love?
yeah. It's the possibilities because you can tell any kind of a story with science fiction, and science fiction is just it's like seasoning that can make any story better. I mean, you can imagine having two neighbors, in a falling in love with each other, but if you have them in a spaceship, going across the galaxy, and not only do you have the drama of their relationship, but now you can throw in wayward robots and space aliens attacking and the ship breaking down. So science fiction just makes everything better.
Okay. So how did your love of science fiction transition into you writing stories in it?
Uh, when I started writing, the first thing I like novel wise I ever wrote was military thrillers, which I was relying heavily on my military experience for that. And I didn't have a whole lot of success selling those books. And then a very kind writer named Russell Blake mentored me, and I brought my concerns to him. And he said, "Well, have you considered writing in a different genre?" And then I thought to myself, "Well, I've loved Star Wars since before I could walk. Maybe I should give that a try." And that became the Ember War, and that worked out a lot better than the military thrillers.
Okay. So many authors let their real life experiences influence the stories they tell. So were there any specific formidable moments for you that shape you as a storyteller?
Well, I did two 15-month long tours in Iraq, combat tours in Iraq when I was in the Army. And then I also served as a military intelligence officer for many years uh, during and after that. So a lot of that does get put into the books. So just the experience and feelings that I had while I was deployed, I was able to put those into the stories where the characters are having the same worries, the same kind of, the mental fortitude that they had to develop to get through that sort of situation. So yeah, it definitely, all that past became prologue for my career as a writer.
Okay. So speaking of the military, your bio mentions that you served in the U.S. Army. So we ask all of our military veterans this question, but how do you feel like your time in the big green weenie affects the stories you tell?
Yeah, it's a lot of the angst and consternation that I felt towards the army while I was in does come out because if you in the army or any branch of the military, the concept of hurry up and wait is a real thing, and so that kind of also gets put into the book where we have to get ready, we're ready, and now we're just waiting, sitting around. It's like you have your PT, your physical training begins at 6 a.m. Well, that means the next lower level wants everyone there half an hour early, and the lower end of that wants everyone there half hour early. So basically, your privates end up having to be there at 4:30 for the 6 o'clock formation. So some of the more absurd parts of the military also get worked into my books, just because it's easy. There's so much material there.
Yeah. So do you ever draw on people that you knew when you were in the military, changing their names or otherwise?
Sometimes it's more the archetype. Like there's one very popular character in the Ember War. His name is Standish, and Standish he's a good guy at heart, but he's also he'll be a criminal for as much as he can possibly get away with. And I remember one time, my security detail, we were guarding this hotel, and as we were about to leave, some junior soldiers noticed that an Air Force truck had uh, a cooler in the back, unsecured, and they decided to dynamically reacquisition this cooler and put it in the back of their truck. And I saw them, and I yelled at them, "Go put it back!" And then I guess they thought I wasn't paying attention because they went and tried to get it again. And then I got a little bit more lieutenant on them, and then brought in the NCOs to try to do some corrective training here. But it's that sort of awareness of what you can get away with while in a combat environment. You kind of comes back to Standish, and Standish he's a great character. He tends to pop up all the time, even when I don't anticipate him being there. And it's but I noticed that with Standish, whenever he shows up, he just makes the story so much better. So I don't mind it.
So first off, just for the listeners who didn't serve in the military or don't understand, the reason the NCOs, when he ordered them to go discipline them, were disciplining them not because they were stealing the cooler or borrowing it or reacquiring it. It was because they got caught.
Yeah.
That was from the NCO angle. Because when I had to do that as a sergeant, I wasn't mad that they tried to acquire extra equipment for us. I was mad if they got caught.
Yeah, and later on, during that deployment, was the one who said, "Hey, no one signed for this stuff. Go get the truck." And then that's how my squadron headquarters ended up with a lot of furniture and a copy machine. So
nice. So we had that problem too, and we learned the hard way because our first patrol was to a Marine base, and they have this saying, "Gear adrift is a gift." And so they tried to take our tow bars because in the Army we left our tow bars combat mounted and just held in place with ratchet straps. We thought that was secure. The Marines had other opinions and they liberated them. And so ensued some shenanigans. But that's when we realized that sometimes you just got to take what you need.
Yeah, and there's no thief in the military. There's just some guy trying to get his stuff back.
Absolutely. So we've talked about how your time in the military affects the stories that you tell, but do you think it affects the stories you engage with as a reader or just a consumer of entertainment?
Well, I tell you one thing is that I generally don't watch military shows anymore because I'll be watching it and just going no, no, no the whole time. So when I am looking for something to entertain me, it's something I don't know anything about, and so I'll take that historical drama or just a comedy show. I mean, if I generally don't look for the same entertainment that I write.
Well, that's how you expose yourself to new ideas and can bring in tropes that people wouldn't have expected too. So, so transitioning from the writing side, let's look at things from a fan angle. So, have you got any cool fan art or had anybody cosplay Standish or any of your other characters yet?
Not yet. I've had a couple people do some fan art. I did get a 3D printed statue of one of my characters named Elias fighting with a Zaros drone, and we're working on getting that statue, getting the files so that people can make their own 3D statue, and I'm maybe by the end of this summer I'll have that available to people. But that was pretty cool to get a
I
somebody
saw the
did.
pictures of that. That was glorious.
Yeah, I definitely want to get that back out to everybody so they can kind of tweak it how they like.
Okay. So has anyone asked for your autograph out in public away from regular like book signings and stuff?
It hasn't happened to me yet, but there was a few weeks ago. I did a virtual career day for my son's third grade, and I talked to a bunch of fourth graders. And it turns out one of the kids who I was talking to had actually read the Ember War, and my first thought was, "You're a little young, but I'm okay with that." So, I ended up passing a signed book off to him through my son. So that was kind of neat.
That's neat. I wonder which one of his parents was reading it first.
Good question. Good question.
So, have you ever spotted anyone out in the wilds reading your book?
Not yet. Not yet. No.
So I think that mostly applies to writers that have been around a little bit longer than us, because back in the Trad Pub days, I imagine with so many people reading Kindles, they'd get a little creeped out if you're looking over their shoulder that much.
That's true. That's true. And then plus, one of the good things about reading a Kindle is that you can enjoy your Chuck Tingle stories, and no one knows that you're reading Chuck Tingle.
Right.
Don't
so is
Google
it true
that,
that you write?
Yeah, don't Google that.
Is it true that that's your alter ego, Chuck Tingle?
No.
There's that rumor going around the author indie community, so I'm just checking.
I would drive a much nicer car if I was Chuck Tingle.
So finally, what is the weirdest or funniest interaction you've had with a fan since you started writing?
I tell you what's always the funnest is I love the band Sabaton. I really love Sabaton. I got to go meet the band when they played in Phoenix like about a year and a half ago. And I work in little references to Sabaton songs and lyrics. And every so often I'll get a message on Facebook or wherever that says, hey man, do you like Sabaton? And then I send them the picture of me with the band, and they kind of figure it out. So, but yeah, that's fun. I like doing that.
And because of you, the Galaxy's Edge fan club is also unofficially known as the Sabaton Appreciation Society.
Excellent.
We share their and you get tagged in all of them. So
I know.
Like Brad Torgensen, he gets tagged on all of the Warrant Officer jokes, and you get tagged on all the Sabaton posts.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know Sabaton, they're a Swedish band that sings about military history. It's a real thing, and it's glorious, just so you know.
It is, and you should check it out. Just Google it, and you know what? I might even throw a link to that in the show notes to the Sabaton website. But so this is the point in the interview, Richard, where you get to tell us everything you've written. So can you give us the highlights reel
of what I've written?
Yeah.
Okay, so the Ember War is my main series. It's got a bunch of sub-series, spin-offs, prequels, sidequels. The Ember War is a pretty big set of books. I mean, it takes up almost 2 whole shelves on my bookshelf with the printed books. And that series is ongoing. The third volume is the Abara Crusade, and that's going to be 6 books, and I'll have that finished this year. And then the very final Ember War book I plan on writing is The Fall of Earth, which is the story of how the Zaros aliens took over Earth, which happens off the page in the first book. So that's the Ember War. And then also I've got The Exiled Fleet, which narrated by the very talented Mark Boyette, and that series also will finish up this year. I have 2 or 3 more books to write there. And that is and then I've also did some historical fiction. I did a novel about the Red Baron, the World War I fighter pilot, and then the older military thrillers, the Eric Ritter series, which is not going to have any more work done on it, but some of the characters from Eric Ritter series are in the Ember War. So you could, and so the Ember War, the Eric Ritter stories are technically canon to the Ember War, but you don't have to read those to appreciate the Ember War. So that's
nice.
And then I've also got the series with Dave Weber that's coming out in June, and the Tier, which will also be finished this year.
Nice. I actually have a signed copy of the Red Baron novel.
Oh, yeah.
That I brought with me when we met in Vegas for the 2018 whatever the writers. I can't remember. We're drawing a blank on that convention, but the writers con.
20 books.
Yeah, 20 books. There we go. That was a good one. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I almost wish you could put the Red Baron in the Ember Wars too.
Tough. That'd be tough.
Yeah. Well, you'd have to give him an upgraded plane, or fighter, but I think you should do it. You should have like
Yeah.
the Red Baron or something. But
I would,
so
I would tell you that eventually I'm going to write a Wargate series, which for if people who out there who read, oh gosh, what is it called? Not Ruins of the Galaxy.
Forgotten Ruins.
What?
Forgotten Ruins.
Forgotten Ruins. Thank you. Jason Osbach and Nick Cole put out the Forgotten Ruins. It's a great story. What happens if Army Rangers go fight orcs? So, my similar story in that same kind of vein will be: what if there's World War One fighter squadrons transported to a magical realm where they have to fight dragons and griffins, and the Red Baron will be a factor there. So that will probably be out at the beginning of next year.
Nice. So will there be a Vickers gun? Because I do love me a Vickers gun.
Oh yeah, there'll be all kinds of machine guns.
Outstanding. So while those all sound fascinating, today we're going to talk about Till Valhalla, which if you're looking at the screen on audio, you can see the book cover. So I'm figuring you got that one already. So how did you come up with the premise for this subsect of the Ember Wars universe?
Well, Till Valhalla, there was a lot of talk about the conflict between China and what became known as the Atlantic Union, which for some reason ended up including Australia, even though it's nowhere near the Atlantic Ocean. But so that was a backstory of, that there was a Third World War, and there was a simmering tension between China and then the West. It was that was the undercurrent of why there was so much military preparedness when the Zaros did finally arrive, and that was all part of Mark Ibarra's secret plan that he had been putting in for decades to keep so that humanity wouldn't get wiped out when the Zaros arrived. So, but with Till Valhalla, I really enjoyed the idea of more armor fighting in Australia, and it was a good war story that I wanted to tell, and it just fit really nicely in Australia. And for whatever reason, I have the best Australian readers. They're really amazing guys. And so when I started to think about, well, I need to do this, set this in Australia and do it right. And I had a good half dozen guys who were there to tell me, no, this is how they would say that. This is where this is, et cetera, et cetera. And so I got a lot of help from Aussies to make that book happen.
Nice. I will be reading that. And speaking of the community he talked about with the armor, if you're on the Facebook, there is an Ember War fan club that one of his Uber fans, not me, started. And you can sometimes find the armor versus infantry jokes that are long-standing if you've had any experience with either branch, where we relentlessly mock each other. So if you enjoy that kind of thing, you should definitely check it out.
Oh yeah. Treadheads and dirty, nasty legs, they deserve everything that they
get. weren't you a tanker?
No, I was artillery, thank you. And then
okay.
Yeah, then I got smart and went military intelligence.
Moving on. So before we dig in, can we take a moment to look at this glorious cover that's been staring at us since we started? So what's the story of this fine piece of modern art that I definitely want on my man cave wall?
It is my artist. He did most of the covers for the second and third, the two series that intertwine with themselves, the Terran Armor Corps series and the Terran Strike Marine series, and he did most of that art. So when I told him, look, I want this, I just explained what I wanted, and boom, here it is. And he did. His name is not Tom Edwards. I got an email from him this morning. His name is Justin Adams from Varia Studios, VARIA. So Justin does great art for me there.
Okay. So speaking of man cave walls, is there any chance that people can get your glorious covers for posters?
You can get them as metal posters over on Displate, DISPLATE. You can get those, and then I'm going to redo a store that actually has the art as proper, paper covers or paper posters. So
nice. And I will throw the Ember Wars fan club link in the show notes as well. And you said it was a disc store?
Displate, DISPLATE. They got a lot of art, and it's posters that they're printed on metal, so they will last you forever. And so it's not like you got to move and you got to roll it up, and then when you get to the new place, that the poster's all wrinkled. You don't like it anymore. So that never happens with display.
I will get the link from you when we are done, and I'll throw all of that in the show notes because I definitely can see spending some money on that. So moving on to the book itself, what would your 30-second elevator pitch be for Till Valhalla?
Till Valhalla is mechanized combat during the Third World War, set in Australia, and it is a story of a soldier who was not ready to go to war, but he gets thrown right into the fire, and then he and his lance mate, they join up with Australian armor, and they engage in a battle that turns the tide of the war in Australia.
Okay. And so what, besides the fact that I'm totally jealous you beat me to using that as a title, what do you think makes this novel special?
Yeah, Till Valhalla, what I like about it is that it's a soldier who understands, he really appreciates the brotherhood of battle. And Till Valhalla is not necessarily a Viking thing, and now the way it's kind of used in modern day. Let's see, how do I put this? So Valhalla in Viking mythology is where the honored dead who die in battle go after they die, and you can't get into Valhalla by accident. You're supposed to be there. The way you get into Valhalla, as far as the Vikings are concerned, is you had to die in battle. So if you say, Till Valhalla within the military, it's kind of a promise saying that I will do what I'm required to do, and I'm encouraging you to also do what you're supposed to do so that we can go on together. So it's kind of a rallying cry, kind of a sort of a war cry, but it's also a promise that if you say, I'll do this till Valhalla, which means I'm going to be true to what I'm supposed to do to get to the reward that is promised.
And at this point in military culture, especially when you've got a country that's been at war for so long with so many, at this point, kids of people I've served with in the early war or have deployed now and become combat veterans in the same damn war. And I think, people we served with were across the religious spectrums from paganism to Islam to no religion. And so I think that sort of became, almost agnostic nod to the warrior culture, separate from its place in the Norse pantheon of religion. So it's definitely something that you hear in modern militaries. I guess it's the equivalent of what they used to say back in the horse cab days when they talk about Fiddler's Green.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things that's part of the culture.
Yeah. Also, as you say, I'll see you on the high ground also sort of means the same thing.
Yeah. So how much hate mail did you get for beating all the other authors to using that as a title? Because
you're the first person. You're the first person that's voiced any consternation.
So, what fantasy tropes do you, or sci-fi tropes do you feel like you put into Till Valhalla?
We got the taciturn badass, your Master Chief kind of person. There's more than one of those in Till Valhalla, and I actually worked in the secret volcano lair that you get with Austin Powers and James Bond. There's actually a secret volcano lair in Till Valhalla, and it makes perfect sense. So I got that going for me. So.
Outstanding. And what about the subgenre? Obviously, this is military sci-fi, but do you think it fits into any other of the subgenres out there?
Military sci-fi, action adventure, war novels. It would be right there. And then, of course, your mech combat, but I don't think mech is its. If readers, if you say it's a mech warrior novel, people are like, okay, I get it. But if you go on Amazon looking for mech combat, you're not going to find it. But, yeah.
I think mech combat and fighter pilots, separate from Space Fleet, should definitely be their own thing.
I agree. We should break that out a bit more.
I wish Bezos would listen to me, but he stopped taking my calls. Jesus, jerk. And so now let's talk about the story itself. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your main characters? What makes him or her unique in the crowded field of science fiction?
So the first go ahead.
I would say, and are these the same characters from your other series?
A lot of the characters from the main Ember War series, they have cameos here, but they're not a big part of the Till Valhalla story. It's all new characters. And the main character in Till Valhalla is a young warrant officer named Amos Roy, and he was in armor training, and he was almost done with armor training, and then they said, get in the robot, you're going to go fight now. And then he gets shot over to Australia and thrown right into battle before he's ready. And which is something that did happen to plenty of soldiers throughout the course of history. There was where you're like, you're almost ready, go. I think there was during the Korean War, they packed up tanks that were on display at Fort Knox and sent them to Korea to fight because they weren't quite ready to deal with the armor advance that the North Koreans had going through the country. But so I did kind of draw on history there of people not exactly ready to fight, getting thrown into the battle before they're ready. And Amos or Roy is known throughout the story. One Roy has to fight, but the good news is he's in a suit of armor which is about 14 feet tall and quite well armed, and so he gets thrown into the fight, and he's trying to work with the Australian soldiers that he ends up being around, and then later on he gets separated from his armor and he's gets dismounted and he has to run around without his armor trying to survive. And I had some fun with those scenes. So, but also for Till Valhalla, the characters who are there, they're going to be in the Fall of Earth. That story, because in the Fall of Earth, the main characters from the Ember War aren't in it. So, Till Valhalla is kind of a bridge from Till Valhalla and the Fall of Earth are going to be the prequel story for the Ember War universe proper.
Okay. So what about any secondary characters? Do you have any that were particularly memorable from you other than the ones that were cameos?
Well, it was mostly just the cameos, because for people who've read the Ember War, there's a character named Bailey. She's an Australian sniper. She's in the book, and she's actually the very first character we're introduced to, and then she kind of shows up and goes, and then Mark Ibarra, he shows up, and he is who he is throughout the Ember War series. And then we got to see Ken Hale he was one of the main characters in the Ember War. So having all these folks, kind of pop up was good again. And then also the Ironhearts from the Ember War, they also show up at the end of Till Valhalla.
There's a certain lovable Scottish sounding chief of the Navy that was in the Ember War series. Do we get to see him?
He's not in this one. No, I'm sorry.
Okay. He was funny.
Yeah.
All right. So what about the bad guys that they're facing? Obviously no spoilers, but what kind of bad guys can we expect?
In this story, they're fighting the communist Chinese, and the Chinese in this story have their own armor. And so getting that armor on armor combat was a lot of fun.
So did you let Heinlein inspire that? Were they on the bounce?
It's the armor in this story is not so much mobile infantry, because they don't, mobile infantry is you're almost a man-sized suit. The armor in my within the Ember War, the pilot is within a little cocoon, and he's attached, or he's connected to the suit through an umbilical that plugs into the back of his head. So then the soldier within the armor, he is the suit. And there's a lot of times you'll hear in the Ember War where someone who's armor, they just say, "I am armor," and because they literally are the armor. And so that's kind of a larger difference. And then they're also within this fluid. It's kind of a womb within the suit. So it's a bit different from Heinlein in that regard.
So how did you come up with the idea to do your armor that way?
Well, the way I came up with the armor is when I was writing the Ember War, the Zaros drones were too tough for the Space Marines I had fighting them. And I said, okay, well, humanity's going to need something to kind of, level the playing field. Okay, well, if they had a bigger, if they were able to carry bigger weapons that could shoot munitions that would take out the drones a lot faster, okay, that makes sense. So let's get this armor. And then, now I'm always, I love science fiction, and I enjoy like Robotech, love Robotech. I remember Avatar, the suits that they had in there. And it always struck me that if you have to move controls to move something, you're at a disadvantage to someone that doesn't. So I thought to myself, well, okay, if these people who are in the mech suits can move the mech suit as easy and as fast as their body, then they're going to have an advantage to somebody who's sitting in there, moving control sticks and pedals and flipping switches and whatnot. So I was like, okay, this seemed like an upgrade to the control system. if you're plugged directly into the suit. And that way, raising the arm of the suit is just as easy and simple as raising your own arm right now. So like, okay, there we go. I like that a lot. It seemed like an upgrade. So that's how that came about.
Okay. It was definitely different. I don't think I had seen anybody do that before you.
Also nice to be different in a good way.
I know I've seen umbilical fluid used in a similar way. Tim Taylor's Sleeping Legion, that's how they did the drop pods, but he didn't incorporate it into armor. So it was definitely a nice touch. So you get a pat on the back for that one.
Oh, thank
All
you.
right. So speaking of characters, so you do a lot of really mean things to your characters.
Yeah.
If they met you in a dark alley, like how screwed are you?
I don't think I'd be too screwed because they kind of I imagine, like, who was it? There's some author somewhere who said, like, one of the things that a writer would be afraid of is ever actually meeting his characters. And I did the mental exercise, and like there's one character who I love. His name is Elias, and if I ever like somehow met him, we would probably just sit down next to each other, not say anything, because I knew what had to happen. He knew what had to happen. It would be okay.
Okay. So finally, what about the universe? In miniseries, the worlds where the stories is told is as much a character as the protagonist and the antagonist. So can you give us a hint of what we can expect from the pre-Zaros Ember Wars universe?
It is. It's the Cold War that is hot, but not hot enough for nuclear war yet. And what's one of the worries is that they're fighting this war on the edge of going nuclear, and they don't want it to go nuclear. So how do you win without upping the stakes to the point of no return? So that's one thing about Valhalla. And for the Cold War, you didn't have the U.S. and Russia fighting itself directly, but there are a lot of times it came pretty close. But in this one, you have China invading Australia, the Australians fighting back, and then now the Atlantic Union finally sends in people to fight in this war. And now the stakes are almost to the point where the missiles start flying, and that's one of the parts of the story is how do you not have the missiles, the silos go empty.
Okay, that's a lot to think about. So we've talked about a little bit about you had the iconic Luke Daniels as your narrator for the Ember Wars universe. So how do you think the tone and tenor of your series would have changed if someone else had narrated it? I think Luke brings a certain something to the books he picks to bring to life. So
Luke is an amazing performer, and if you've ever watched him live on Facebook, he doesn't just sit there reading; he acts out with his body while he's speaking. So that's it's a good deal more of a performance than you would think you get from a narrator. But Luke definitely goes above and beyond, and I don't you can't. Right now, you can't separate Luke Daniels from the Ember War, or rather, you can't separate the Ember War from Luke Daniels, and I'm fine with that. So, and he's in the booth right now recording the next Ember War publisher pack that has Ember's Ashes Fall and Steelsworn in it.
So can you tell us a little bit about those publishers packs? Because I know you're one of the few authors who continues to write short content that you generally will give away to your newsletter, and then you bundle and you get audiobook narrated. So is that something that actually you do because it makes you a little bit of scratch enough to cover it, or is that purely fan service?
It's mostly fan service because it's the longer the audiobooks, the more credit worthy it is. So instead of asking your reader, here's a 8-hour book for your credit versus here's a 15-hour book for your credit, and people generally appreciate that they're getting more bang for their monthly credit. So people appreciate that. I'm glad people are happy with that. And then also when it comes to bundling the short stories into audio, I got to appreciate that with Podium because they're the ones who said, yeah, well, give us the short stories. We'll have Luke record it, and then it will just be bonus content for listeners. So it's always nice to give more value to people.
So do you think at any point in time you're going to bundle the short stories into a paperback type collection for those that are Dead Tree enthusiasts?
Probably. I mean, that's probably something I could do pretty soon. Just have the Ember War short story and little anthology. That is something, yeah, down the line.
Okay. Obviously, there's only so many hours in a day, and you've got lots of books to write because people probably hound you for more. So, Till Valhalla is clearly part of a larger universe. We know because you've told us, and Amazon says, and if Amazon says it, must be true. So, but is this story done for Chief Amos and the other characters?
No,
Do you see?
the characters in Till Valhalla will be in the Fall of Earth. We'll see them again.
Okay. Um, and without any spoilers, will we see Chief Amos in some of the other potential series? I know you've mentioned in other podcasts that potentially Josh Hayes would be continuing his characters. So there's room for some of these crossover type stuff. Or
I tell you what, everyone who's in the Fall of Earth, that's the last book they're going to be in. So,
okay,
that's just the story works. So it's gonna be a real interesting story when I read that. But then but now Mark Ibarra, he'll be in the Fall of Earth, and he's in almost every other Ember War book since then.
So what was your inspiration for Mark Ibarra? Because he's definitely a unique character.
Yeah, it came down to Elon Musk was a big part of that, and with Mark Ibarra, I needed an inventor who was going to change how technology worked in the world. And the reason that was happening was because he knew the Zaros were coming, and he knew Earth had to be at a certain level of readiness to survive. So Mark Ibarra, after he was contacted by this alien probe that warned him about the Zaros, he had a decades-long plan that he had to put forward so that Earth and humanity could survive. So, and then the more I think about Elon Musk, I'm like, what does he know? Does he have a hint? Because Elon Musk, he's dead set on getting us to Mars as fast as possible. And I'm like, does he know about a comet coming? Can he share this with us? I'm not sure. So it's
so you're not saying it's aliens, but you're not saying that Elon Musk knows aliens.
I don't know. Sometimes I think Elon knows something that the rest of the world doesn't. And one thing I enjoy studying and learning about is ancient cultures. And there is the Younger Dryas event, which likely was the inspiration for Noah's flood and the flood that's in almost every other culture around the world. And the more I've looked into this, and the more other people have done all this research, is that there's almost this cyclical nature of disasters that hit Earth every 9 to 11,000 years ago. So, and I look at what when was the last one? It was about 11,000 years ago, and I'm thinking, did he do the math, and that's why he's trying to get us to Mars so fast? But it's just rapid speculation. It might be a good idea for a book series someday. I don't know. We'll see.
All right. So we know that every literary universe, or at least the good ones, have their own internally consistent rules of science and technology. So what sort of tech could we expect from these books for people who lived under a rock and haven't read the Ember Wars?
So when it comes to Ember War tech, for by and large, there's no faster than light travel. It's all wormholes and wormhole gates and wormhole projections. And then lots of, I'm a big fan of Gauss weaponry. And so we see lots of that in railguns. And of course, you got your mech combat, and then you have your power armor. There's a fair amount of power armor within all this. So it's nothing too far beyond the bounds of what's possible now. So.
Okay. So of all of the tech that you invented in this universe, what would you want for your own daily use?
Oh boy. My first thought was like, well, I'd love to have a mech suit, but then I'd be walking around with a plug in the back of my head, and people think I'm into some sort of weird body art. But having my own suit of armor, I think, would be nice, especially when I ever had to deal with my HOA and just go to the meeting in that. But then also, a ship like the Brightonfell, which is a strike carrier that's got, the railgun cannons, and it's very much like the Tiger's Claw from Wing Commander, which I loved when I was growing up. So if we had a Brightonfell in orbit, I'd love that.
So what made you pick the motto for the Brightonfell that you went with the German?
Well, got to go back to Sabaton. So when I was writing the Ember War, and I knew I named ship, and I was debating what was I going to name the ship. Is it going to be the Yorktown? Is it going to be something well known? And then I was listening to Sabaton, and the song "Gotten It Done" came up, which is about the Battle of Brightonfell in 1619. I want to say. I double check on that. This is a historical battle where you had this Swedes and their German allies were fighting other Germans, and like the battle cry of the day was "Gott mit uns," which is German for "God is with us." And so I'm listening to this song. I thought Breitenfeld, that sounds cool. No one else has got a ship out there named the Breitenfeld. So I went with the Breitenfeld to kind of set my work apart and sort of stand out. It's like, here's the history I'm drawing from. So it's not just another ship name that everyone's heard before. So if you went with the Yorktown people, they have historical associations. The Breitenfeld, especially for an American audience that may not have a lot of knowledge of German and Swedish history for some reason. So they hear the Breitenfeld, it's like, oh, this is new and interesting. And then during the course of the book, they tell you, I have the book inform the reader about the Breitenfeld, the battle that happened, Gotland Huns. So, and then a lot of ships within the Ember Warriors, they all have mottos to them. And amazingly, all the mottos somehow reflect back on a Sabaton song, one way or another. How that worked out.
So it's mystery upon mystery.
Yeah, like I have a ship named the Normandy, and their motto is Prima Victoria. And if you know Sabaton, that's like one of their first big songs was about the Battle of Normandy.
So you've talked about that this book the Till Valhalla does not have aliens in this book, but obviously the larger universe does. So what can you tell us about the aliens in your world?
There are many and varied, and sometimes they're humanity's friends, and sometimes they're not. We have the main antagonist through the first series is the Zaros, but then also humanity picks up some friends along the way who the Dotari or the Dotok as they're first introduced. And then there's not so nice aliens particularly with the Toth, who are a lizard or reptilian-like species, and the Overlords survive as brains in the jar, and they get their sustenance from absorbing the neural energy of other living beings. And those are the Toth turn into great villains. So I'm kind of happy with them.
I did enjoy them. So when you create these aliens, how did you do it? Did you let nature inspire you, generally speaking, or do you just create it completely out of your imagination?
So with the Zaros, I wanted something that was not the drones themselves were not going to have any sort of compassion. They couldn't be reasoned with. They were just like a force of nature. So that's how the Zaros drones reacted. And then later on, we were introduced to the intelligences that control the drones, and they become, they have their own reasons for being. With the Toth, I had an idea for a story, and I just like within my old notes, it was free the farm, and the story, the idea for that was that there was a planet that had a whole bunch of humans on it, and these humans were kept as cattle, but they didn't know they were being kept as cattle. They had a religious background where they were called to God, and then these pilgrims end up getting eaten or experimented on. So, and this community never knew that they were being used like this way, and so I had this idea for a story where a special forces team goes and has to bust these people out before they're all sacrificed, so to speak. And that's story idea became Gardens of Nibiru, which within the Ember War universe. But the bad guys for that Save the Farm story I had in my old notes were the Toth. And then as I was writing the second book in the Ember War series, Ruins of Onthalus, I had my, I was in the outline phase, and I had my strike marines running around this planet, dodging the drones, and I thought this needs more. I need more action. So I thought, well, how do I get more action and more drama out of the situation? Well, let's add in a new bad guy. So then during the course of the writing the Ruins of Onthalus, the Toth show up, and they are their own sort of bad guy, and they have their own desires and what they're doing on this planet, and then Toth became kind of a secondary antagonist through the Ember War series. And part of the Ember War series is that Earth is discovering this wider galaxy, and they find some friends and they find lots of enemies in the process. And the Toth are another enemy that came up during the course of exploring the galaxy.
So without any spoilers, this is just me asking because I'm a nerd. Do you ever plan on going back to the planet the Garden of Nibiru is set on and solving those mysteries?
Nibiru, that what happened on that planet got finished, but going back to how those first two humans got put on the planet, and I don't think so. It's because I think it's everyone who's read the Ember War, they know the outline, they know the final, they know the story, so there's not a lot of tension for me when it comes to prequels. Whenever I try to tell one, there has to be tension. The way you do that is you have to have a completely different story that people don't know the answer to. So if I put, like, let's say I wrote Till Valhalla and I had the Ironhearts being the main armor, the main characters, it would lack a lot of tension because everyone knows that the Ironhearts are in the next couple books. So when if the Ironhearts are getting shot at in Till Valhalla, the reader knows they're going to be fine. So I had different characters for that. So whenever I think about doing a prequel, it's either I'm going to tell the story that people don't know, or I'm going to tell a story that people do know, but with people, where there's enough possibility that these characters could be harmed or killed, or they're actually in peril. So, but if I did like a prequel story of how those humans got put in that Toth world, you kind of know. So, I don't think I would go for that.
Okay. So you also addressed in the universe writ large, and we're going to dance around this, the concept of cloning as a way to quickly generate bodies when you need soldiers and just to repopulate. You're not the only universe to do it, but were you trying to just quickly get bodies? Were you trying to send a larger message about, what is humanity? What was your thinking when you were writing that?
Yes to both. Because when I was writing the Ember War and I get to the end and I realized there's only a couple 100,000 people left, and the Zaros are going to come back. These couple 100,000 aren't going to cut it. So so I realized that was a roadblock for the whole series. So during the first book, I set it up so that, hey, no, humanity's got an idea to have adults trained and battle ready adults coming into the force pretty quick. And the how that happens, and I call them procedurals, is where you have sperm and ovum get combined to a baby, and then throughout the course of about 9 days, that baby grows to be a full adult, and then during that whole time, that person is having memories put into their mind and put into their brain. So then that way, if you say we need fighter pilots, well, then okay, you go to the tanks, and then 9 days later, you have fighter pilots coming out who are trained, but they're procedural because there's going to be just enough difference in all of their memories that they all not thinking the same. They're going to have, they're all going to go through the same training, and they're going to have the same sort of skill set, but there's going to be a lot of variations into how they act. So they're all unique individual people. And during the course of the Ember War, the question is, do they have souls? Are they even real people? And that's an argument that's continues throughout several series. And then one other thing is that the people who make these procedurals, sometimes they put in memories and commands a little Order 66 like, and that is a big source of trust issues for these people when somebody like the Ibaras can just go and say certain code words to a procedural, and then all of a sudden the procedural is 100% on their side. They don't understand it. And that's one of the worries and problems with this sort of technology. Now, when it comes to actually being clones, I wouldn't call them clones because they're not technically clones. So, but no, just procedurals. And then I kind of like the idea that people can not like procedurals and also like them. It gets people discussing. Well, what are they really human? Should we really be doing this where people come out of these tubes with a certain mindset and a certain loyalties and vulnerabilities? So that's I enjoy having that discussion within the series.
So when you wrote those characters, had you read Hugh Howey's Long Way Home?
I had not, no.
Because that's one of the things he addresses is to colonize distant worlds. They basically sent the baby batter, and then they gestated in a artificial womb and basically grew the humans on site for the planets. So that way, because obviously, if you don't have FTL, sometimes you're talking generations to get to various locations. So thought that was interesting. It's some of those things about sci-fi that make it fun, that nature versus nurture, and what exactly humanity is and where those lines are. It's always fun.
Yeah. That's one of you can't really ask that. You can't do that in a fantasy. You can't do that in military thrillers either.
No, you cannot. Well, you could, but then you're crossing over genre boundaries. And is it still really just a military thriller then? Hard to say. So clearly this interview is winding down. But before we wrap this up, was there anything about Till Valhalla that we didn't ask that you wanted to tell us?
The Till Valhalla, you can find it in a brand new anthology put out by the great, wonderful, and very talented Kevin J. Anderson. And we will have a link to pick up that bundle along with many other great military sci-fi books. And JR, I do believe you have a book in there as well.
I do. And so if you go to the storybundle.com on the 19th, which will have already be live when you listen to this, the definition for the story bundle from their own website is a way for people who love to read to discover quality indie books written by indie authors. You know how it's always hard to find something good to read? Story Bundle helps you solve that. They take a handful of books, anywhere from 6 to 9, and group them together as a bundle, generally around a certain theme, in this case, military sci-fi. And then you, the reader, can take a look at the titles they've chosen and decide how much you'd like to pay. There's generally a minimum, but you can pay as much over that. You can set the percentage the author gets versus the charity, and you basically get to drive that ship as the consumer, which is the way it really should be in a free market. So it's a good deal. The link will be in the show note, and there are a lot of good authors, and you have been listening to those interviews for last week. So, all right, Richard, how can listeners find you on the wild internet?
One of the best places is just go on Facebook and type in Richard Fox author, and you can find me there. And I on my Facebook page, I post book covers before they're out, and I put out most anything about my writing. And so follow me on Facebook is a great place. And then also you can sign up for my newsletter, get a free book, then also get a bunch of free stories written by me. And JR, if you'd be so kind as to put that link in the show notes as well, which I'm sure you will. I think you already have it. And so really, Facebook, and then signing up for my mailing list, and then you will not miss a thing from me.
Outstanding. I'll make a point to specifically put your sublink in your website for the newsletter. And you can find us, dear listener, on our website at anchor.fm/blasters tack and tack blades, anchor.fm/blasters tack and tack blades. You can follow us on Twitter at SF_fantasy_show, Sierra Foxtrot _fantasy_show. You can email us at blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. We have the Facebook group, Blasters and Blades Podcast, facebook.com/Blasters and Blades Podcast, where all of the crazy shenanigans happen and our inappropriate memes are shared. You can support the show on anchor.fm with a subscription service, much like Patreon, if you're familiar with that, or a one-time donation at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. And be sure to put in the comment section that this is for the podcast, and we'll make sure we keep Nick Garber and Cisca lubricated and intoxicated, and I will be your sober driver, and we can have all the fun. So thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For Nick Garber and Doc Cisca, I'm J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom.